This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
So the Browns offseason is unfortunately upon us a little bit earlier than we had hoped, but nonetheless, it's time to get into the offseason. And the NFL offseason, while something is always happening, like something's always going down in the NFL offseason, while that's the case, it can be something that's a bit tricky to navigate, right? Like the dates are a little hard to find. Sometimes you just log on to Twitter or wherever you get your news and find out that it's some kind of big day. So I'm going to try to get you ahead of the pack when it comes to the offseason. I'm going to talk about the important offseason dates for 2024 and why it's important to the Cleveland Browns, and it might be important to other teams. So that's what this video is for. This is going to be the Browns 2024 offseason guide, and I have a bunch of dates here to talk about. So the Browns' first date to talk about is this weekend, January 19th. That is the draft eligible date. That's when we will find out what players are eligible for the draft and not, and what players have declared for the draft or not. We finalize the draft pool on January 19th. Now, we're pretty close to set there on the draft pool for the most part. We know what major players are going to be there, who the top picks are projected to be, all of that. But it will become official this weekend, January 19th. Now, January 30th is something I talked about in the previous video. It's the Senior Bowl. I will be in Mobile, Alabama. Eyes on the field, boots on the ground at the Senior Bowl for the very first time in this channel's history to get an in-depth look there. And the reason I wanted to do that, I'll reiterate again, is the Browns always draft like 4 or 5 players almost from the Senior Bowl. And if you want to get an eye on the new talent that the Browns are going to go after, the Senior Bowl is usually a great place to go for that. So that's going to be an important date here coming up. February 4th is the Pro Bowl. Look, it's a consolation prize to watch your favorite players in the Pro Bowl for sure. But it's still something that's fun, right? It's going to be fun to watch the Browns players go and be able to have fun at the Pro Bowl, accept their honors. I believe the Browns had 4 Pro Bowlers, and potentially they're going to have, they have 5 alternates, so they could have up to 9. There's going to be a ton of Browns during Pro Bowl weekend, a ton of fun stuff that you're going to see, a ton of fun media that you're going to see produced around the Pro Bowl. So it's going to be a fun time to be a Browns fan around then. February 8th is also an important date because that's NFL honors. Now, one of the big misconceptions since the NFL has started doing this is that people think that the voting for this award happens much later than it does. But the voting for the NFL honors happens in the end of the season, right? Like the last game ends and then everybody submits their vote and it gets submitted. It's before the playoffs. The votes are already in and they just wait to announce the winners of those awards on February 8th. So that's what kind of goes down with that. With the NFL honors and all of that. So we'll find out who's coach of the year, comeback player of the year, defensive player of the year. If the Browns get certain awards, the Browns get this, executive of the year. All of that we will find out on February 8th, and that will be fun to cover and talk about. February 20th is an important date for a lot of teams, but I don't think it's going to be an important date for the Cleveland Browns. Is the franchise tag date. Now, why is this an important date for a lot of teams? Obviously, it's when you franchise tag players, but the Browns don't really have anybody I would consider a franchise tag candidate. I think when you look at the Browns, The only guy that you could see in the future becoming a franchise tag guy is like JOK, but he's not a free agent this year. He's still under control for the next year. So he's obviously not going to be franchise tagged or anything because he's not even eligible to be franchise tagged. Other than that, a lot of the free agents that the Browns have, like you wouldn't franchise tag Zadarius Smith or Obo Okoronkwo. I don't think you would franchise tag Sione Takitaki or Anthony Walker. Like the Browns have free agents that they can either re-sign or let go. But we'll find out more and more as the days go on, but I doubt they're going to do any franchise tagging. February 28th is the NFL Combine, obviously an important date where these guys test, run their 40s. All of that draft hype comes into the start, and that's when we're going to start doing our mock drafts on this channel. The franchise tag deadline for the teams is March 5th. So if the team is going to franchise tag somebody, they have until March 5th to do it. They also can transition tag somebody. We saw that happen with Lamar Jackson last year. But that's what the deadline is there for. And then you get to March 11th. Now, how the NFL does free agency is that it technically starts on March 13th, but you can start pretty much announcing and doing free agency March 11th. So that whole week is kind of just finding out who's going to be in the not the playoffs, who's going to be in the free agency picture, who's looking to go where, what's going to happen there, who might have signed where. That's when free agency starts. And then after that, we get a very interesting time frame, right? Because in the spring, before OTAs, it is expected currently that Deshaun Watson is on track to be back for voluntary OTAs. And I do think that's important because what we need is, one, we just need more game reps for between like Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson. They need more game reps. Now, obviously, you're not going to get game reps in the spring. Nobody is under that thought process. But you can collaborate, work together, see what things are meshing, see what things aren't, see what pieces you need to go and kind of fill in the blanks with. If you signed anybody in free agency, which I expect the Browns to probably go after a replacement for Harrison Bryant. I expect them to go after some wide receivers in free agency as well. Like there's going to be new pieces to this offense in free agency, so it's important to get those guys together. And we also know that Deshaun Watson, in the summertime, usually host a player camp for the offense somewhere in a foreign country. Usually it's like the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, wherever it is. That's usually something that Deshaun likes to do once a year, every year. So that's also going to go down. So Deshaun should be back around the spring, right in time for voluntary OTAs. And I do think that's important because the more work he and Kevin can get together, the more collaboration that they can do together, the more crisp they can be to start 2024. And the more crisp you are to start 2024, the more chances you have of victory, all of those good things. April 25th is the NFL draft. So those 3 days will obviously be very important for the Cleveland Browns as the Browns look to draft. This will also be the last draft in which the Browns don't have their control of their own first round pick. Now they could ultimately trade it or whatever, but they have control of their first round picks after this draft. So last first roundless NFL draft for the Cleveland Browns. And then May 2nd is another important date for the Cleveland Browns because that is the deadline for the 5th-year option. Now, unlike the franchise tag, the Browns do have somebody who's going to be up for their 5th-year option, and that's Greg Newsome. Anybody drafted in 2021, you have to declare whether you're going to give them their 5th-year option this year. I mean, not this year, but you have to declare whether you're going to give them their 5th-year option by this date, by May 2nd. And the Browns have the option to do so with Greg Newsome. Now, Greg is just wrapping up this is his 3rd year as a Cleveland Brown. So he'll be going into his 4th year. And my thought process, even though a lot of people are down on Greg right now, I think, it'll bounce back to normal eventually because Greg did have a horrible postseason game. But Greg, if he's on the roster still by May 2nd, which I think is likely, he will get that 5th-year option. I think there's a possibility that the Browns could trade him before the draft. but I don't think the Browns are going to be dying to trade Greg Newsome before the draft. Like, I don't really think they're going to be in a rush to get rid of him. And if it's May 2nd and nobody's giving them a great offer, they're going to get that 5th-year option because he's not that expensive being a late first-round pick. I believe he was like the 25th pick of the draft that year or whatever it was. He's not going to be super expensive. And I think that 5th-year option is like under $10 million or somewhere around that. Somebody with the exact numbers is probably going to put it in the comment section, but it's not super expensive to 5th-year option him. Like Jed Wills was a little bit more expensive because he was a top 10 pick, but if the Browns felt it necessary to 5th-year option Jed Wills, they're going to 5th-year option Greg Newsome. And the Browns, they believe in the guys that they draft, man. And they're going to give them chances to fail and succeed after that. And it's resulted in some great players playing for this team. So I expect them to do the same with Greg Newsome. Then you get May rookie mini camps. June 1st is an important date for contracts, right? Like a lot of dates, contracts have June 1st or post June 1st designations. So that's going to be important to watch as the team goes forward. And then you have the July 17th. Again, I don't expect the Browns to franchise tag anybody, but if they were to franchise tag somebody, July 17th is the last day that they have to have that player sign that franchise tag. If that player does not want to sign that franchise tag, I believe there's like a 1-year deal that they have to sign. It's essentially similar to the franchise tag, but not the franchise tag. So July 17th, that's the day that they have. Or I think the player is, if he doesn't want to sign the franchise tag, there's like you can sign somewhere else for a 1-year deal, but a team has to give up draft picks or something. I don't know what the formula is for it. I don't expect it to be to matter for the Browns this season, but that's the franchise tag sign date. And then you get into training camp. And then once you get into training camp, I think you're going to start hearing about Nick Chubb, Jack Conklin, all returning. And I'm going to be honest, I think Nick Chubb probably won't return for week 1. Like, I think it will be a surprise if Nick Chubb comes back for week 1, but knowing Nick Chubb, he's probably going to make me look like an idiot and be back here for like mandatory camp. So we'll see what happens with those guys, but those guys' knee injuries during the season, you expect them back during camp. But that is the guide to the Browns 2024 offseason. And with that guide, I will be here with you every step of the way. The grind never stops. The days don't stop. Just because it's the off season doesn't mean it's the off season for me. But thank you guys for watching. You guys have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.